Okay, welcome everybody to today's presentation on building your yardstick, the first step in confident caregiving skills. My name is Molly Schlapp-Gilgoff, and I'm one of the managers of mission initiatives here at the National Eating Disorders Association. I'm so excited to welcome all of you here today. I'd like to take a brief moment before we get started to talk a little bit about the National Eating Disorders Association and the work we do. NEDA is a nonprofit organization working to increase awareness of eating disorders, provide information and resources, advance research, and advocate for change through campaigns like the Eating Disorders Awareness Week and Body Acceptance Week, and through our Campus Warriors program and Walks program. We are working to increase public understanding of these complex disorders. We also provide information and resources through the Cozyne Resource Center, our toolkits, a screening tool that has reached over 1 million people, as well as through our educational programs like the ED 101 presentation and webinars like this. Additionally, we invest in innovative research that helps to develop and further effective treatments and work in collaboration with other groups to improve policies and systems to prevent eating disorders and expand access to quality care. If you would like to support our work and more programming like this webinar, we would greatly appreciate any donations. Today's presentation is led by Bryn Miller, who is a licensed professional counselor in the state of Colorado, a certified eating disorder specialist and consultant, and a certified advanced therapist in emotion-focused family therapy. She is also on the advisory board of the Colorado Eating Disorder Professionals Group, supports family, parents and caregivers through volunteer work with the Eating Disorder Foundation, and is the founder of Bryn Miller Parent Coaching. If you have any questions during the presentation, please share them in the chat feature and I'll relay them to Bryn at the end of the presentation during a period for questions and answers. Now I'll turn it over to Bryn. You can take it away, Bryn. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Molly, thank you so much. Can you hear me and see me okay?
Yes, all good.
Awesome. Perfect. And let me go ahead and share my screen with you guys, and we will go ahead and get started here. All right. That work? Can everybody see that? All right.
I can, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Molly. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for introducing me, and thank you so much for having me here today. I have so much that I want to share with you guys, and I have a tendency to talk too much, so I am going to go ahead and just jump right in. But what we're going to talk about today is this idea of building your yardstick, which is really an introduction to confident caregiving skills, and we'll get into what that means. But first, I want to say a big thank you to the National Eating Disorder Association, to Doreen, Molly, for all of you for allowing me to be here today. This is such an honor. It's such an incredible organization. And I'm just thrilled to be here with you all. Also want to give a little thank you to the founders and the pioneers of emotion-focused family therapy, which is the approach that's really going to underpin some of our work today. And then last but not least, really a huge thank you to caregivers, all of you that are here now, if you're watching the recording later, a huge thank you for taking the time and the energy to be here tonight. It says so much and tells me so much about your willingness to show up to support your loved one. So thank you. It's really an honor. So I'm Bryn. I know Molly kind of shared a little bit about me, but just so you have a sense of who I am, I'm a certified eating disorder specialist and consultant. So I've been working for over a decade now with adolescents, young adults, and adults alongside their families and their support systems in eating disorder work exclusively. I'm also an expert in caregiver support and skills. So I'm an advanced certified therapist in emotion-focused family therapy, and I'm one of I think it's 8 or 9 of us that are certified to run the EFFT 2-day caregiver workshop here in the United States. And I think it's really important to mention that I am also a deeply imperfect caregiver myself. So it's important for me to tell you, for you to know that I am not coming from this place of having all the answers or having this all figured out. In fact, one of the reasons that I do this work is that I'm a parent myself and I have two young boys that challenge me every single day, day in, day out. I find parenting to be the coolest, most rewarding, most profound, but also most incredibly challenging thing on earth. And I have all the skills and tools in my toolbox, and I still think it just feels impossible on the best days sometimes. And so I am really coming with so much empathy, so much admiration for the work that you're doing, especially as a caregiver or loved one supporting someone with an eating disorder. So a little bit about where I'm coming from and my background. So what to expect today. So if you've never done a workshop or a webinar with me, I am obsessed with effectiveness. I want this to be the best use of this time. And so I really want you to get the most out of your time today. So some of the best ways to do that, I know Molly said this, but if you have questions, just pop them in the chat and then we'll cover them in the Q&A. So as we're going along, if something comes up, put it right in there, and then Molly will kind of walk me through it at the end. But grab a pen and a piece of paper. Whenever I do this work with parents and caregivers, I really want it to be interactive because my goal is that you leave at the end of this and you have some new skills and new tools that you can start using at dinner tonight, that you can have in your pocket for tomorrow morning. So I really want this to feel super interactive and leave you with concrete, actionable tools that you can start using. That being said, you do you, honor where you are today. I can appreciate, again, after a decade of supporting families who are supporting loved ones with eating disorders, you might be walking in from a tough meal, you might be walking in from a family session or a day in program. So honor where you are today. You're all going to be coming to this in different places. And a good time to make the little disclaimer that I'm going to be putting out some ideas for you guys tonight. Take what's useful and really filter it through your expertise on your loved one, your family, your treatment team. I don't want anything here to undermine the work that you're doing and the professionals that are supporting you and your family. It's not a replacement for that. Just something to, kind of more tools to put in the toolbox. And then lastly, this is just a taste. So I will have a ton of resources at the end of ways to kind of do a deeper dive if the work is something that's exciting and interesting to you. So first, we're going to start by taking a deep breath. I know it's like the most therapist-y thing to say, but one of the beautiful things about virtual is that we can all be out on the other side of that door, running around doing a million things, and then pop in here and then pop back out. But sometimes it doesn't really provide that moment to let yourself settle here. And so give yourself a minute. I'm actually going to put a timer on my phone and give us 30 seconds to just take some deep breaths and really try and give yourself permission in the next 30 seconds to settle here in this space. Know that anything on the other side of that door will still be there, will still be waiting for you when we're done. But the more you can allow yourself to be here, the more you'll get out of it. So I'll put 30 seconds on the clock and we'll take some deep breaths. All right. And if you, like me, might have noticed that that's the first time you've stopped and really taken a deep breath today, that's okay. Make a note of it. And if when you sit down to do, 30 seconds of breathing, if you feel like, I don't even know how to get regulated there, I don't even know how to do that. After we're done here, take 3 minutes and just Google a couple different breathing exercises. It's too good of a hack, of a skill, of a tool to have in your toolkit for me not to mention. Just a go-to breathing exercise, even if it's just inhale for 5 and then exhale for 7, something that just helps you regulate your nervous system. If there is one skill or tool that you leave with today, it's an incredibly valuable one. So put that in your pocket. All right, we'll dive in. So here's the problem, which I probably don't have to articulate to all of you if you're here. You can feel lost sometimes. You want to help your loved one. You're desperate to help your loved one, but you're not sure how. You try and help and you feel confused. Your loved one might be pushing you away or even saying, don't talk to me about this, or I don't want you involved, or you don't get it. And you worry that you're not helping or even that you're making it worse. And I can tell you in all of my work with parents and caregivers, that's one of the biggest fears is if I get involved, if I'm in the mix, am I going to make it worse? And it can really get in the way of being able to show up with how you want to support your loved one. So it's really important to take a moment here and just reiterate this sentiment that I hope at this point you've heard 1,000 times. Caregivers do not cause mental health issues, period. Especially when we're talking about something as complicated and complex and as multivariate as eating disorders. Caregivers do not cause mental health issues. They do not cause eating disorders. And so as we're moving through this work, if you're noticing a narrative of your own self-blame, if you're noticing your brain kind of going to that place thinking like, yeah, Bryn, I know you said that caregivers don't cause mental health issues, but you don't know what I said or you don't know what I did, right? Just make a note of that. And it might be a place to kind of continue to do some of this work. You didn't cause this. You can, as a caregiver, however, be the most important part of your loved one's support system or treatment team. So the fact that you're here and the skills that we're going to use today are incredibly valuable because of that. So today, we're going to focus on you, the caregiver. Why are we going to do that? First of all, you're the ones that are here, right? But also in emotion-focused family therapy, or EFFT, we believe that caregivers have a superpower, and we actually have a ton of really cool research and data to back this up. And one of the kind of main pillars of EFFT is what we've learned from something called interpersonal neurobiology. And effectively what that means is that you are wired to your loved one. And so when there is an attachment process, when there's love that gets exchanged between two people, there's a wiring that happens in each other's brains. It changes. And this is this idea of interpersonal, neurobiological shifts that happen in these relationships. And so when you, as a parent, as a caregiver, as a sibling, as a spouse, as a friend, have these tools and use them with your loved one, it has a greater impact than if I were to do this with your loved one on my best day as my best EFFT therapist, because they're wired to respond to you. And I know it doesn't always feel that way, but there's really incredible data and research and science to back this up. So you really do, as a loved one, have this incredible superpower. The other reason is that you have access. Even if your therapist is meeting with you 3 times a week or 4 times a week, oftentimes as a caregiver, as a loved one, you have more access to them on a regular basis. And I've worked with a lot of families where there might be estrangement or disconnection in the relationship. And if that's where you are, first of all, sending love, because it's such a special kind of pain. But stick with me because I think there's a lot of skills in here that can still be of value to you. You're also the expert on your loved one. So as the caregiver, no one knows your loved one the way that you do. And so that's why I say, even everything I'm going to throw at you tonight, put it through that filter of what you know about your loved one. You also love them more than anyone else. No one is going to go to the lengths. No one has that same level of love for them that you do. And when we can leverage that, there is so much change and transformation that can happen. And lastly, that you don't give up. Parenting in particular, family in particular, is a job that we never retire from. Again, even if there's distance or estrangement. So again, you are here today, and part of that is in you holding the hope for your loved one, regardless of where they are in their journey. So it takes two people to create a pattern, but only one to change it. And this is Esther Perel, who's this famous relationship psychotherapist. But it gets to this point of, even though your loved one isn't here tonight, you being here, you showing up differently with some of the skills we're going to talk about, has a huge impact on your loved one, because you're in this dynamic, connected system together in this relationship. And so the other way I explain is that oftentimes our loved ones are sort of downstream from where we are. And so when you shift something, when you change something, even without them doing anything, we've shifted the system. We've shifted the way the river flows, if that makes sense. So my goal in working with caregivers is to restore your ability to be calm in really, really challenging moments, to feel more confident in your ability to support your loved one, whatever that looks like, and to feel more connected, both to your loved one, of course, but also feel more connected to the caregiver that you want to be, how you want to show up for this person that you love when they're struggling. So this is sort of my North Star in doing this work. That being said, we don't tend to rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. This is such a dorky quote that I'm obsessed with from Atomic Habits by James Clear, but effectively saying that goals are great and we're going to set some goals tonight, but we have to have a system in order to implement those goals. Otherwise, there's nothing to scaffold. There's nothing to support these goals that we've set. So in that vein, as I've been doing this work with caregivers, I've created a 5-step framework. And this 5-step framework is called the Response Roadmap. And effectively, it's 5 steps to help you go from this place of crisis and conflict into that place of feeling more calm, confident, and connected. And so we start with recognize what's coming up for you. We move to getting skills on how to regulate more effectively, reconnecting with your values, who you want to be for them, responding effectively, where we talk about emotion coaching and actually writing out scripts. What do we say? What do we do in these tough moments? The step 4 is refuel, where we start to talk through how are you filling up your tank so you can keep showing up. And then lastly, reflect and repeat. So how did it go? And how do we hold the hope? How do we keep going? Because especially with eating disorders, it can be a marathon followed by a marathon followed by 5 marathons. And that our job is in large part to continue to hold the hope for our loved one. And so in order to do this, we lay some foundation, we lay some groundwork, and that is really starting with building your yardstick. So this is where I start with every parent, caregiver, family that kind of walks through my door. This is our first stop, if you will. And I'm going to walk you guys through it. So building your yardstick. So I want you to take out that pen and paper that we talked about, and I want you to set a goal. Why are you here? What do you want to have happen? What do you want to see? If you had a magic wand, if you could change one thing that's going on with your loved one, with your family, what's a goal that you would have? And I'll give you guys a minute to jot something down. All right. If you're here, I'm going to guess it wouldn't take you too long, because I'm sure as you were registering this, there was something in mind of like, oh, I really hope this helps with X, Y, and Z, right? So take a look at the goal that you wrote. It is only natural when your loved one is struggling to start by focusing on what they need to do or not do in order to make progress. This makes so much sense because they're the ones that are struggling, right? Because it's so easy to see their behavior, especially the behavior that you know isn't helping them or is maybe even hurting them, as is often the case with eating disorders. And because you know you can't do it for them, right? So it's like they need to weight restore. They need to stop purging. They need to work on their compulsive exercise, you know? So in that very natural tendency, we tend to set what I call the wrong goals. And wrong goals start with, are they? Again, only natural to go to this place, but really important to pause and kind of reflect on. So are they engaging in behaviors? Are they using their coping skills? Are they asking for help when they need it? Are they willing to go to treatment if that's something that they need, right? Really, really normal. And it can be incredibly disempowering. If your desire, if your hope for your loved one to get better or to work on these things was all you needed, I would bet it would have happened already 1,000 times over. That our hope, our want for these things for them isn't enough to make it happen, unfortunately, right? And so in doing this work, we have to really hold these two truths at the same time. And the first truth is there are some things that you cannot do for your loved one. If they need to weight restore, you can't eat for them. If they need to stop purging, you can't stop purging for them. If they need to work on body dysmorphia, it's not something that any amount of work that you could do could fix that for them, right? And at the same time, in the same breath, there are so many things that you can do for your loved one. And so it's really about making sure that we're focusing our energy and our efforts on the things that are going to be the most effective. So what are we going to do instead? We're going to build your yardstick tonight. So when you have a loved one that's struggling, I don't have to tell you, you don't have the time and the energy for goals that are ineffective, or to be channeling your energy into things that feel sort of like banging your head against a wall, right? You need goals that work, and you need a system to help you know if you're meeting those goals, so that you also know if what you're doing isn't working, if it isn't effective. So much of this, and I will tell you as someone that is trained in however many number of evidence-based practices. Every human being is different. Every family is different. So much of this is trial and error. And a huge part of the work that we do is, what are our markers for success? And how do we know if we're meeting those markers? Because if we're not, we need to go back to the drawing board. And you don't have time to be kind of barking up the wrong tree, so to speak. So another reason this is so important is that oftentimes the feelings that get really activated, and this is this beautiful tool that we use in EFFT to explore what we call caregiver blocks, which is a whole nother talk. Maybe I'll come back and do that one later. But that some of the feelings that tend to lead to caregivers showing up in ways that they feel are not in alignment of how they want to show up. When I have a caregiver come in and say, gosh, I'm accommodating again, or like, oh man, I got so critical of my loved one last night, or gosh, I really am getting into this like defensive other blaming place, you know, that when parents, caregivers, loved ones show up in this way, it's almost always because these feelings underneath are getting activated. And the feelings that tend to get really activated when we're feeling ineffective are helplessness, which is there's nothing I can do, hopelessness, which is it's never going to get better. And then all of this is amplified by burnout. And what we know about burnout, especially in terms of caregivers, is that it's less about the work they're doing and the number of hours they're putting in, but burnout is really the correlation with burnout is very, very high, with a sense of feeling ineffective. And so again, this is why these goals are so important. So you're going to build a yardstick so that when I ask you, you know, if the tools and the skills that you're using, are they working? Your metric is going to be, do I feel more calm? Do I feel more confident? And do I feel more connected to my loved one and the caregiver I want to be? So We're going to talk through 3 reasons, which are going to correlate to 3 skills, which are going to be the 3 skills I'm going to leave you with tonight, including your breathing exercise that I know you're all going to Google after this, of course. The first one is we need to keep you focused. So when you're starting a new skill, you need to set goals that are challenging but attainable in order to build momentum. That this skill is going to help you stay on track. What are the goals that I really want to focus on? And that's going to be our first one. Our second one is going to help you evaluate progress. So again, how do we know if it's working? So this second tool is going to give you an efficient way to evaluate your progress in your work that you're doing to support your loved one. And then the last one is going to be providing this mindset shift. So anytime we're tackling a new skill, it's helpful to approach it differently. Making sure we have the right lens is really going to help you maximize your impact and make it easier to implement some of these things. So the first skill is called the circle and the square, and it's a visual exercise that I'm going to walk you through. The second skill is called the did I questions, and it's a writing prompt that's going to help you check in with yourself daily in order to collect data on how it's going, right? And then the last one is what I call the O reframe, and it's supporting that paradigm shift so that you can really start to view those tough moments with your loved one as an opportunity to show up the way you want to. So this is our first skill. So if you've got your piece of paper, I want you to take a fresh sheet of paper and I want you to draw a big square on the outside of your piece of paper with a big circle in the middle of it. So it looks just like this. And make sure there's enough space here, if you can see this, where you can write some things in here, but also enough space where you can write in the circle too, if that makes sense. And so step 1 is in the square, but outside of the circle. So like in this area, but not in this area. We're going to write down the things that your loved one does that worries you, or that you wish they would do, or that they wouldn't, that you wish they wouldn't do. Again, this gets back to if you had a magic wand, if you could be in charge of your loved one's behavior, what would you have them do more of or do less of that you believe would support their recovery process, or that would help their mental wellness, whatever that looks like. So you guys start writing, and I'll just throw some examples out here. But this could be kind of under that eating disorder umbrella. This could be eat more food if they're struggling with restriction. Get weight restored if that's something that needs to happen for them. Go to treatment, go to therapy, meet with their dietitian. If again, those are things that you think would help them, that you wish they would do, that maybe they're not doing consistently, or there's a lot of pushback around it. I wish they would eat more variety of things if they're struggling with perhaps ARFID, for example. And so, it could also be things like, I wish they were isolating less. I wish they would open up to me more. I wish they would spend less time on social media, take their medication, anything that's kind of coming up to you. Again, this is where we're really focusing on what you would want for your loved one if you got to choose their behavior, right? And so just jot, if you've got a lot you're thinking of, that's okay. Just jot some things down, and I'll keep walking you through this. And if anyone has any questions, like I said, we'll circle back at the end. So step 2 is inside the circle that we left blank, right? So on the outside, we've got all of your loved ones' behavior. Inside the circle, I want you to write down some things that you could either do or not do, or do more of or do less of, that's in relation to your loved one's behavior. So if we were using the social media example, I wish my loved one spent less time on their phone, or less time on social media, right? One of the things that could be in the circle is I could talk to them about it. One of the things is, depending on their age, I could remove it from their phone. One thing is I could incentivize them to spend less time on social media. I could have a conversation with them about what my concerns are. I could start that conversation by validating all the reasons that I know it's hard to get off social media. I could examine my own interactions with social media. I could stop going on social media myself and talk to them about that. I could model that for them. I could ask them to spend time with me during a period of time where they typically are on their phone. You know, I could send them a text and invite them to play a card game, even though they're kind of holed up in their room on social media. All these different things. And again, this is where it's really important to filter it through your relationship with your loved one, their age, where they're struggling. All of these things are going to impact what feels appropriate in terms of your behavior. But it's translating one of the things that's in the box that's out here into, okay, what is something that I could do that may or may not impact this behavior of theirs? So take a second to kind of jot some of those things down. And again, if you're feeling stuck, we can talk through it at the Q&A at the end. And then what we want to do is almost imagine that the outside, that the area that's in the box, but not in the circle, falls away. And I want you to think of what's left in that circle. You could even pull out a pair of scissors and cut it out, as I've had some families do in my office. This starts to become your goals. These are the things that you want to really focus on. These are the things that you really want to work on. And I want you to imagine that your focus or putting your energy towards the other parts of it starts to fall away. And this is helping us get laser focused on what is in your control, which is your behavior. And what you should be left with in this circle, it should have two qualities to it. One is that it should be 100% in your control. So for example, if I were to say, I'll give you $1 million if you text your loved one and tell them you love them and invite them to come play a card game with you. And it would be totally in your control whether or not you earn your $1 million. If you were to say something like, my loved one will play a card game with me, not in your control, right? And not, you don't know if you're going to get that $1 million, right? So it has to be something that you can say with 100% certainty that either you're going to do it or not do it, but that it's in your control. And then it also has to be a behavior. And so thoughts, feelings, we're talking more about what you're showing up and what you're doing. And so this would be like, if I followed you around with a video camera, I could see you do this. So I could see you send that text. I could see you working on your own relationship with social media. I could see you having this conversation with your loved one, for example. So it's got to be a behavior and it's got to be in your control in order to make it into the circle. And then from there, we start to break this into smaller goals of ours, and then using this as a marker for how did it go at the end of the day. And so what we're shifting our focus to, instead of the, are they going to X, Y, and Z, or did they X, Y, and Z, we're really looking to shift this to, did I? Did I do the best I could? Did I try and use the skills today? And so this is the second skill. This is the did I questions. So in the left column, we write out your loved one's behavior that's challenging for you or concerning or scary or worrisome. And then in the right column, we're going to write out what you want to do in response. And again, it's got to be 100% in your control to make it into the right column. So the example I always use, I have one of my kids is 4.5. And so we have a lot of meltdowns at Target, especially if I make the mistake of like, hey, come with me and we're going to go buy a gift for another kid's birthday, but I'm not going to buy you a gift, right? If you've done this recently with a 4-year-old, 10 out of 10 do not recommend. And so we've had many a meltdown in Target, usually like starfishing, screaming, hysterically, crying. I told you my kids keep me on my toes. So I have no control if my 4.5-year-old is gonna pick today to be the day that we're gonna have the meltdown at Target. But the question I can ask myself, and I often ask myself, is did I stay calm? Did I not yell in response to his behavior? And I'm not going to even kind of pretend that I don't yell. But my goal usually going into this is, can I at least stay calm? If nothing else, can I do what I have access to stay regulated so that at the very least, I'm not escalating it with him? And so did he have a meltdown? Maybe, maybe not in my control, but did I do everything I could to stay calm? Did I use my breathing? Did I use all the skills I'm teaching you today? Did I stay focused on my behavior, to do the best I could? Right. And then there's other things of like, okay, he had a meltdown at Target. Did I try and squeeze in one too many errands? Did I think it was going to be okay to bring a 4-year-old to pick out a toy for someone else? Like, and it doesn't mean I did anything wrong. And it's really important to come yourself with kindness and compassion that this is really data collection more than anything else. But it might be information that is a good reminder of, okay, maybe I don't want to bring him, on a Friday when he's exhausted or hasn't had a snack, right? That's gonna increase the likelihood of something like this happens. Is it gonna eliminate the likelihood of this? Absolutely not. But again, starting to focus on what are the things that are in my control and letting go the things that are not in my control. And so when we start to kind of zero in, go from that circle, what's in the circle, and start to articulate what are the little pieces of this, then we can use this at the end of each day to track how it went, right? So, okay, my loved one did this. Did I stay calm? Right. And if you did, you're like, great, put that in a success. What allowed me to do that? Gosh, that breathing thing that Bryn taught me really helped. Right. Or, I did not stay calm. And so that goes in the struggle column. And then again, we look for patterns. We come to ourselves with kindness. Does it have anything to do with the fact that I didn't get any sleep last night? Is it related to how overwhelmed I'm feeling at work? Just having a better understanding of like, okay, if I didn't stay calm the way that I wanted to, what contributed to that? And is there anything we can do there, right? But it's really about starting to very clearly parse out what is in your loved one's control and what is in your control. And then lastly, our reframe, our O reframe, as I call it, is obstacle, obligation, or opportunity. And it comes from this idea of that how we perceive something has the power to change so much about how we show up and how effective we can be. And so what if we saw these moments in a different light? And so I want you to think of a moment recently, a huge struggle with your loved one. Let's say you got in a big fight about them going to therapy. You really feel like they should have gone and they refused to go that day or they didn't want to go that day. It's really easy to see that moment as an obstacle, right? Where you're like, well, they need to go to therapy. It would only help. They've had a really tough week. And that's always when everyone ditches therapy is, the week you need it the most, right? I can say that as both a therapist and someone that's ditched my own therapy on the weeks that I really need it. And so it's really easy to see this as an obstacle. And you're not wrong. And that's an important note to make here too of your sense of, gosh, it really would help you if you were to go to therapy this week. Absolutely. But when we're approaching it focused on this being an obstacle or a barrier in your relationship or your ability to show up for them, it carries a different weight. When we look at something as an obstacle, the struggle becomes even greater. So in other words, if I'm to use my Target example again, if I see my 4-year-old on throwing his fit and I'm like, oh, we're late. I've got to go home. I don't have anything for dinner. Like we're doing this again. Like, oh, I'm more likely to be irritable. I'm being harder on myself. I'm having less empathy for him. The odds that I get out of there without yelling pretty low when it's an obstacle, right? Another alternative is we could see these moments of struggle as an obligation. Like, okay, you chose to have kids, Bryn, you tell everyone to stay calm, like you got to do it, right? And we can kind of like, work up our energy. We can kind of force ourselves to show up. But it's sort of like moving through mud a little bit, right? It feels like we're dragging our feet. It feels like it's something we have to do. When we see these moments of struggle as an opportunity with our loved ones, it creates this completely different energy that we're able to embody. And so when you have a moment that's incredibly challenging and you see that moment as an opportunity for connection, when there's a chance to help your loved one feel really seen and really heard in a moment of their own pain or their own struggle, what that can do for the relationship, what that can do to build the trust, to build the connection, to build their sense of confidence in you and your ability to be there for them. The way that it allows you to access your calm, if a really tough moment is just an opportunity to build connection, the stakes feel so much lower. And so when my 4-year-old is having a total meltdown and I'm looking at him and I'm like, wow, this is such an opportunity for me. I get to come towards him and help him better understand what's happening for him in his body. I can go to him and say, buddy, you are so mad because you really wanted that toy and I wouldn't let you have it. Now you're so frustrated. And that me articulating that to him is helping build these neural pathways in his brain that it's going to help him build his emotion regulation skills and his own resilience going forward. And then I follow that up with, and I'm not getting you the toy, and it's okay, you're mad. That I'm also teaching him in that moment that you don't get everything you want, especially after a temper tantrum, because I don't want to positively reinforce that behavior. It's also an opportunity for me to stay calm. It's an opportunity for me to put my money where my mouth is in terms of coming here and doing this work with you guys and saying, well, yeah, if you're going to preach it, then you got to practice it as well, too. And there's an opportunity to build so much empathy for my work in that moment. And so the tricky thing about life and about this work is that we tend to grow, we build strength, we build confidence, we build resilience in moments of struggle. It's not the good days that make you strong. And if you think about your own life, I bet that is a theme that you would see. It's always the hardest, toughest stuff that serves us the most, that is the catalyst for change and growth and strength and resilience. And who among us doesn't want that for our loved ones, that greater resilience, right? So just playing around with that, if I could see this moment as an opportunity, how might that change things? And so being able to kind of walk yourself through that. So quick review on those three, and then I'm going to leave you guys with a couple last thoughts. So the first skill is that circle in the square. It really helps you hone in on the goals that are most effective. The did I questions to help you check in and collect some data points about what you're doing really well and what you might need more help around. And then the O reframe to just allow you to kind of shift a lens on it, that it can really help us step out in a moment of struggle. One last thing that I'll leave you guys with, and this comes from acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a type of therapy called ACT that we use often, is, are we seeing your loved one as a math problem? And this is really, really normal, especially when they're struggling, especially when the stakes are really high, as they often are with eating disorders. We feel like we need to fix them. We feel like they are a problem that needs to be solved. It's really, really normal. And it's how we tend to kind of manage things in the world often. But ask yourself if it's helpful. And if it is, great, keep doing it. We have this saying in EFFT, which is, if what you're doing is working, keep doing it. But if you find yourself seeing your loved one as a problem that needs to be fixed, as a problem that you can just solve if you think hard enough, Does it help you? Does it support you in how you want to show up for them? And then an alternative to that is seeing your loved one as a sunset. We don't try and change a sunset. We don't try and fix a sunset. We don't tend to wish it was different or say, like, this cloud should be poofier and that cloud should be over there. We accept it as it is, even just for a moment. And I know, and I want to be really clear that that doesn't mean, saying, especially if your loved one's struggling with an eating disorder, especially if it's dangerous, saying, all right, I'm just going to accept things as they are, but rather as a starting point, as a jumping off point, to see them as their full selves, to see the beauty even in the struggle. And I'll tell you, having spent a decade working with people with eating disorders, one of the things that I hear more often than not is, I wish my loved one saw me as more than my illness. I wish my loved one wasn't trying to fix me all the time. And some of that is inevitable, some of that is important, some of that is life-saving. And so that's not wrong, but it's also, how do we help access being able to see them this way, even just for a moment? And does that shift something for you? And then step 4 is refuel. And I'm just going to put a tiny little plug in for this, which is that it is absolutely non-negotiable. If you want to continue, if you want to use these skills, if you want to access your calm and your confidence and your connectedness, you have got to refuel. And I don't talk to parents about this and caregivers, sorry, as self-care anymore, because everyone's eyes glazes over. This is like filling up your gas tank in your car. You know what happens if you push it and push it and push it and you run out of gas. You end up broken down on the side of the road, and it's a bigger pain in the butt than it would have been if you had just stopped and filled up your tank. It is non-negotiable. So really starting to think of it that way, and that self-care is other care. So as you care for yourself, if you pour into your flower pot, you're better able to show up for the people that you love. And lastly, celebrate your wins. It is a very important antidote to feeling burned out, perfectionism, resentment, especially when the stakes are high. We don't pause and celebrate our wins, and it can be so draining because we don't fill our cup up. We don't feel like we're making progress, even if we're making great strides. So pause, take a moment right now to just thank yourself for showing up here tonight and doing this work. Give yourself some credit, even just for that, because and again, I hear this from caregivers all the time, you want your loved one to be able to do the same. And so start doing it for yourself. It's a really, really important part of this process. So huge thank you to the National Eating Disorder Association, to Nita. It is truly an absolute honor to be here. And I want to say, on behalf of your loved one, and a massive, heartfelt, in my bones thank you. Oftentimes they don't say it, depending on, again, their age, where they are with their struggles. You might not hear this for a while. Sometimes it might take months or years to hear a thank you for everything that you've done. So let me say it for them, and hold the hope. Good things take time. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that it never will. You holding the hope is sometimes the biggest game changer. So in terms of what's next, I have some different opportunities, different resources. And so on my website, brynmillercoaching.com, there's the whole response roadmap parent coaching. There's an online course, which is accessible, on demand, self-paced. I also do a course in a cohort where I move a small group of caregivers through the through the course over 8 weeks. And I do that quarterly. And then I also have the course along with one-on-one private coaching. And I do a free monthly newsletter as well. And so you can sign up for that, access that. There's about 2 years of newsletters with all free resources intended for caregivers. And so that's all accessible on my website. And then just the references. So I think that's it on my end. I will stop sharing, and Molly, I'll pass it back to you if you have any questions from anyone that I can answer.
So I don't see any questions. The only one was, well, will the slides be shared? And there is a recording of this that will be made available afterwards, so people can see it there. And I just posted in the chat that you can access the companion workbook, by clicking the link to Bryn's website. And if anybody has any questions, the chat is open and Bryn's here, ready.
Happy to help.
Just give it a moment, I guess. Just
Oh,
a lot of
thank you.
thank yous.
Thank you.
Oh,
Mm.
here we go. Any words of encouragement that work to get your loved one to eat?
Hmm. Such a good question, Karen. And gosh, there's a great article on Feast on their website. And it is, gosh, let me see if I can find it for you guys. I'd be happy to pop it in the chat. But it's all about using what we call emotion coaching in that meal support moment. And so it's hard to explain in 30 seconds, but I'll try, which is effectively starting, and it's really counterintuitive, but starting with validating for your loved one the reasons why they might be afraid to eat or they don't want to eat. And so this is another good example of like, okay, what's in my control? I can't totally control whether they eat or don't, but can I show up calm? Can I show up confident? Can I try and connect with them in this really tough moment? Absolutely, right? And so one of the things that I think is most valuable is starting with your loved one and saying, hey, I get why you don't want to eat right now, because it feels really hard, because you're scared and this food feels really scary to you. And maybe because you've had a long day and you're already exhausted and it takes so much energy for you to sit down and have a meal like this. And so it's the first step of emotion coaching where we really validate for the other person what their experience is. So we're not agreeing with it and we're not saying, sure, you're off the hook, you don't have to have dinner, but we're just saying, I understand where you're coming from, given your perspective, given what's going on for you. And then we follow that up with emotional support, which is like, I love you, I'm here with you. And then practical support. And depending on, your situation, that might be something like, do you want me to talk to you while you're eating, or do you want to play a card game, or why don't we just take a few deep breaths and then we'll sit down and try again, right? And so really kind of talking through, yes, that's it. Julia, thank you. This is a great article that Julia just put in thank you. Awesome. It's emotion coaching for meal support. It's a really, really cool article that kind of gives you an introduction to this. So we use this same framework on any tough conversation, but it can be really helpful in terms of like some of that resistance around eating, which is really hard. And so again, just coming towards your loved one with, I can see why this is so challenging for you. I'm here with you. You're not alone in it. What can we do, if anything, to try and make it a little bit easier for you? And again, if you're able to like really focus on what you're doing in that moment versus what they're doing, you're going to be able to show up with so much more empathy and so much more calm, such a more calm energy, which is really going to help both of you in terms of kind of regulating your nervous system. Yeah, that's a great article. Awesome. Other questions that you're seeing there, Molly?
Yeah. So, what are some of your favorite self-care techniques when you need to recharge?
Ooh, gosh, there's so many good ones. It's really about what fills your cup up, what works for you. I do think that there's just too much evidence and data around having some deep breathing techniques in your pocket. It's also something that you don't need anything for. You can do it anytime, anywhere. It takes 10 seconds. And so having that as a go-to is really important. I think figuring out for you, what are the things that you need? And so I've personally found in order to be the parent I want to be the provider I want to be and the coach I want to be and do all the things that are important to me. I need a whole bunch of different things in that in that refuel. And so like meditation is a great one. Exercise is huge for a lot of people. Getting outside, sitting in nature, reading a good book. I love trashy television, like really bad reality television is one that just like it's a great recharge for me. Reading books that bring you a lot of joy, being with people that you love, taking a nap. I mean, it could be anything. Googling DBT skills might be a good place to start if you're like, just give me a list. I always encourage caregivers to have a playlist, like give yourself one playlist that sort of like calms you down when you need it. Give yourself one playlist that kind of builds you up when you need it. And just thinking about what's in that toolkit of what do I need when I need to, go from a 10 to a 2, and what do I need when I feel like I need to work up to a 2, that can be helpful. So many different things, but again, it's whatever kind of helps you regulate your nervous system.
Okay, let me just quickly look. Well, I get maybe that goes with this, but like, what would you recommend for parents who are feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's a good question. It's a really good question. I think another thing kind of like to sort of tie those two together is checking in with yourself in terms of how are you taking care of yourself. So some just like really basic things like are you sleeping enough, and are you sleeping well, and is there anything you can do? And sometimes these things are outside of our control, right? But if there's anything that you can do that might help you there, that is almost everything is downstream of sleep, right? And so sleeping, are you healthy? Are you doing what you need to do to take care of your own physical health, right? Um, are you getting enough to eat? Are you fueling yourself in a way that you feel good, right? Are you just tapped out and overwhelmed? And so I really talk to caregivers about harnessing the power of no, and taking things off your plate, especially if you're in a season of overwhelm, as is often the case. Really giving yourself permission to set some limits and some boundaries about what you can and cannot take on, and trying to do even less than you think that you can do, so that you have some space and some bandwidth for those days that just kind of knock you down, which is inevitable, right? I was listening to this podcast recently, and the woman was talking about how even a factory only runs at 80%, because to run it at 100% and then run the risk that that's going to overload the system, and then you have to shut the whole factory down, that it's not worth it. And it really made me laugh, because I was like, oh my gosh, we don't even run factories at 80%, but how often are we running ourselves at like 110%, right? And expecting that we're not going to break down, and we're not going to get sick, and we're not going to fall apart. And so really like taking a step back, and again, some of these things are inevitable and there's realities to this, but what, if anything, can you say no to, and you can put some limits around? And then I think the other thing is just know that you deserve your own support. I think this is a huge struggle in the United States, and there's some other countries, including Canada and the UK, that do this so much more beautifully, where if you have a loved one that's struggling, you immediately get access to mental health services, because they understand that this is a system, and that if we want to help this person, we need to help the people around them. And so again, it can be hard to access all these things, but get yourself some support, get yourself into rooms with people that know what you're going through, that know how this feels, so you don't feel so alone. Because so often the overwhelm also just comes from, and nobody gets it, And so just another reason it's so important to find those places to connect with other people that are going through similar things.
Thank you. And that's perfect timing because I think we're about at the hour mark. So
Awesome. Perfect.
that's wonderful. Thank you so much for an amazing presentation.
Of course. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me, Molly. And thank you to Nita. And again, thank you to all the caregivers who showed up. I just want you to know that this is a gift, hopefully for yourself to take a little bit of this time, but it is also a gift for your loved one. That even if they don't know you're here, even if you never use any of these skills, that just taking this time is a beautiful gift that you're giving them. So thank you.
Okay, thanks. Take
All
care,
right.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.